I'm watching the live stream of Dr. Nick Greenwood. I'm watching the live stream of the show for the first time ever this week as I'm off work looking after the kids while my wife's visiting a friend who is in labour in Edinburgh. I usually listen to the podcast at some time after the day of the show, sometimes up to 6 weeks later, depending on how busy I am and therefore how often I get to listen. So he's not a regular, really, Nick, but it's nice to have you there. I'm loving the live stream experience, including seeing the very professional-sounding newsreaders giggling in the studio. That will be Justine Green, who entered a few moments ago wearing the most extraordinary coat. This is clearly her last read of the afternoon. It looks a bit like a shirt I wore on Top of the Pops in 1987.
Excellent. You see, it's all very retro, Simon.
It is.
It's the purpose of a webcam, really.
I'm especially enjoying the all-famous flappy hands. Just slightly disappointed to see Dr. K has joined in with Dress Down Friday, a denim jacket. Anyway, love the show, Steve. Keep up the good work.
Well, can I just say that everyone has said this? Not on telly today. Then I am going to change. It is possible for me to change in the middle of the day. I was doing something else earlier on that required me not to be wearing a suit.
Do you want to squeeze a mini reviewette?
No. Do a couple of emails because we are next going to go to the majesty that is Sucker Punch.
Oh, excellent!
And I would like to have a little bit of space to give it the full. The full consideration that it so richly deserves, because it's a new film by Zack Snyder. Hey, Zack Snyder.
Don't shoot your boat before you actually get there.
I think I'm ready to talk about Sucker Punch.
How do you know that you're ready?
Well, the tagline is "You will be unprepared," and I feel that I am fully prepared.
Yes, I was the posters for this.
Yeah,
I just thought this is going to be an April Fool. What it's going to turn out...
It can't be real.
No, well, it's going to be an advert for vodka or something like that, and that's why we're unprepared, and it wasn't going to be a proper film. That's what my assumption was.
The tagline for the thing, Sucker Punch, close your eyes, open your mind, you will be unprepared. Sucker Punch is an epic fantasy adventure that takes us into the vivid imagination of a young girl whose dream world provides the ultimate escape from her darker reality. It then says, born from the creative vision of filmmaker Zack Snyder. So, anyway, here's the story. Zack Snyder, in the past, has given... Incidentally, the lovely thing about this was it opened in America and had a very brief spot at the top, and then it was knocked off the top spot by Diary of a Wimpy Kid 2, which I think tells you a lot of things. So, Zack Snyder, in the past, gave us Watchmen and 300. And the thing about him is, which is why I keep going, Zack Snyder, and I've got no idea what he actually talks like, incidentally. You have to understand that...
So what's the impression based on?
Because they're not to do with what people sound like. They're to do with what they sound like in my head. You've just banged your knee really badly on the desk. Zack Snyder. So, in the case of 300, effectively what he did was he took a sort of, a political and interesting cartoon strip, and all he saw was the costumes. It's great. Look, it's the Battle of Thermopylae. We're going to send them all in dressed in rubber pants, and they're going to fight with people, the village people. So it's like costume. It's a costume drama. There is a sort of source which has got a whole bunch of stuff in it, but we're not interested in that. We're interested in them walking around in rubber pants. Then we get along to Watchmen, which, Watchmen, many people really, really love as a graphic novel. I mean, even I read Watchmen. That's how popular it was. And Zack Snyder comes along, and many other people were on to do it, and Terry Gilliam was going to do it at one point, but it finally falls to Zack Snyder, who the only thing he sees is the costumes. Like, it's a bunch of people in rubber, lots of people dressed in rubber, that's fine. He is the living embodiment of a person who cannot see beyond the surface of anything whatsoever. All he sees is the costume. And here it is now, in the case of Sucker Punch, which is effectively shot corridor, the Sam Fuller film, as redirected as a video game pop video, but directed by Arlene Phillips. So what he's got is, it's like he's just got a bunch of costumes. He's got a bunch of fetish costumes, and then he's got to figure out a way of getting them into a narrative. So
it sounds like a Pan's People dance sequence.
Yeah, and believe me, Pan's People wouldn't lower themselves to the dance sequence that is Sucker Punch by Zack Snyder. Sucker Punch. So the story is, right at the beginning, there is a young girl living with an abusive father, and the abusive father is hideous and horrible and abusive, and she attempts to finish him off, and she then ends up in an asylum. Now, at the point that she is admitted to the asylum, somebody says, how old is she? And they say 20. Got that? She's 20. Okay, so you go, she's 20. Why is she living with her father? Why is she dressed like that? But she's... Oh, fine, I say, understand. So for conscience-clearing reasons, she's 20, right? She then goes into the asylum, and then what we see is that that she's about to be lobotomised, but... just at the moment that that's about to happen, there is a strange escape into a fantasy world. And in this fantasy world, or is it a fantasy? Is it, what is real? What's real? What's real? Who knows? What's real? Is it these clothes, or is it what? And so in the fantasy world, she exists in a sort of burlesque club And the
strip joint.
Yeah, I think that, well, burlesque is stripping with A-levels. Strip joint, you're right the first time. And in this burlesque club, her and the other inmates, when they're doing their burlesque-like dances, are in fact fighting monsters in this other fantasy world, and they've got to do a bunch of stuff, but they've got to do it dressed as strippers. Here's a clip.
So, the first thing we need is a map to figure out where all the exits are. Second thing we need is something to start a fire with, as a distraction for when we escape. Plus, the fire should disable all the checkpoints. And the third thing is a knife, in case we run into any trouble. The cook. You can do it. Okay? And the last thing's a key. Blue wears a key around his neck. What door does it open? It's for all of them, I think. It's a master key. I'm in. So am I. Me too.
All right. But I'm only doing this because you guys get caught without me, okay? And if it gets too hairy, if I say it's over, we stop.
Okay.
Now, just to be clear, in the BBFC's description of the certification, it says... the sex references relate to the fact that in one of the fantasy worlds, the female inmates of the insane asylum are transformed into burlesque performers and hookers in a club. They are invariably dressed in lingerie, stockings, and other skimpy items of clothing. Just to be absolutely clear.
It's Pants People, okay. 1975.
Exactly. That is essentially the plot. That's not a description. That is essentially the plot. They are in a burlesque club dressed as hookers. Now, obviously, there is, in the great exploitation market, there were loads and loads of, like, you know, the strip-to-kill movies made by Cat Shea, these rating certificate movies made for adult audiences that, you know, essentially, it was the old Roger Corman thing. You have to have a scene in a strip club and then scenes of vengeance, all that sort of stuff. Okay, fine. What you have with Zack Snyder is this. Firstly, he takes this, you know, he costumes first. Costumes an idea for, and then everything else has to work around it. I noticed that a lot of people have got quite exercised by the sexual politics of this, from which I understand, but in a way, getting exercised by the sexual politics of Sucker Punch is doing it a service which it does not deserve. Because in order to get to the incredibly dubious sexual politics of it, which are just...
What are they?
Just unspeakably stupid.
Give me a go.
Well, the characters, she's 20, but she's dressed as the stripper, and she actually says, oh, yeah, I get the whole school thing and this, that, and the other. All that, fine. All that. In order to get to that point, to get exercised by that, you have to get involved enough in the movie to be cross about it. The key thing with Zack Snyder, apart from the fact that he appears to have just no understanding of anything below surface and costume, is that he is one of the worst storytellers in the world. So you're sitting there going, okay, do the story. Okay, the story is she goes into an asylum, then we go inside. Maybe the whole thing's a fantasy. Maybe it's all in the dying moments. Maybe it's a Jacob's Ladder thing. But then go, no, oh, I see. Oh, it's just the costumes. You haven't got a story, it's just the costumes. You haven't got characters, just the costumes. It's actually what you want to do is you just want to do a pop video with just those costumes. In fact, in the closing sequence of Sucker Punch, it does in fact become a pop video in which two of the characters sing Love is the Drug for reasons which are just nothing. It's like, I've got the movie out of the way, now I can do the thing which I wanted to do, was do the pop video. It is in the same way that burlesque was showgirls for 12-year-olds. This is essentially Strip to Kill for, you know, for a younger, but without any of the interesting things about those. It is just unbelievably dull. And you have these great big battle sequences played out with war and planes and stuff and leaping down and lopping their heads off there, and you're just going, why is this so boring? How is a movie that is so throwing everything at the screen in the way that Zack Snyder does the whole time, because he's bothered that if you look at something straight in your face all the time, he's going, I'm sorry, that is how you have to say Zack Snyder,
no,
Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder.
Bill,
Zack Snyder.
someone near Cambridge, could you please
stop doing
Mark
that?
To stop saying that
Zack
name
Snyder,
in
Zack
that
Snyder.
voice. He speaks
That's
to the nation.
yeah, but believe me, watching the movie, I actually fell asleep. There was a moment in it during one of the battle sequences when they're all running around in the fetish gear with the knives and the stuff jumping out of planes and the thing and the dragony what's it and the hoojama flip and the this. I had a little snooze and I woke up and they were still in exactly the same place. It is, quite apart from everything else that's wrong with it, quite apart from all the ideological issues, which is not even worth going into, because assuming that the film has anything like an ideology is, as I said, is doing it a disservice. Doing it a service it does not deserve. It is the most boring, ploddingly put together, infantile, crass, adolescent, stupid, chauvinistic twaddle that I have sat through in a very, very long time. And I was just had me the screaming, awful noise of this thing. It's so boring. It's astonishing that you could take this many potentially incendiary elements and make something that crushingly dull. It doesn't matter whatever else may be true of Zack Snyder. He, as a storyteller, he is just like, it's like an overdose of sleeping pills. You just sit there going... And then we get to the end and he does a pop video. You go, you know what, Zack? Do the pop video. At least it was only 3 minutes long.
Paul in London writes, Dear Musa and Kusa, I'm taking my 9-year-old son and 5 of his chums to the IMAX to see Sucker Punch tomorrow.
Really?
For his 10th birthday treat. Right? My wife booked this treat before checking any details about the film because that's what busy mothers can do sometimes. Having seen a trailer online for said Pussycat Dolls meets Spearmint Rhino feature, do you have any tips I can employ to placate the parents when we have to hand the sure-to-be traumatised boys back to their parents?
They won't be traumatised, they'll be bored.
But
they'll be bored.
Not when you're 12,
I think I actually...
You're 9 years old, you're going to see Sucker Punch, you're not going to be bored.
Actually, I disagree with you. And I'm, on a serious note, funnily enough, when we came out of the movie... I had a conversation with somebody about exactly this. Is it just, or how do you think it would play to a 12-year-old? I think a 12-year-old would be bored because there isn't any story. I don't believe that actually what happens is you only develop an interest in ideas and narrative later on in life, but up until that point you can do, because you cannot do a pop video for 2 hours.
Might the clothing just sort of distract them for a bit? And I would
for a bit.
Would you recommend it for 9-year-olds?
No. Okay. Would I recommend it for 90-year-olds? No. Would I recommend it for anyone on earth? No. It's a 2-hour trash pop video that isn't even as good as I just made it sound, and I therefore have to retract that straight away because that sounds better than it is. It's so dull.
Marcus Sprinkle saw Sucker Punch at my local cinema in the US. Normally I can forgive a lot of this type of action flick, but this time I have to say something. For all the stuff that was going on the screen, and there was a lot of stuff going on, I sat for the entire length of the film bored out of my mind.
Good.
The plot was non-existent. The switch between the various dream states made no sense and had no relevance. And the Sucker Punch ending was obvious. I went home and watched Inception to remind myself what a decent multi-layered movie looks like.
I think that somewhere in Zack Snyder's mind he thinks that this is Inception, which is a terrible thing.